Actually, the given time was 9:15, sir. Okay,
Okay,
we shall wait for another 5 minutes, sir.
no
Please, sir.
problem. Yeah.
Asha, am I audible, Asha? Otherwise, I have to use headset.
No, ma'am, you are very much audible, ma'am. It's very
Okay,
clear.
Asha. Okay. Thank you, Asha.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can you make me the co-host so that I can share the PPT?
Yeah, sure, sir, sure. Tilaga? Tilaga?
Ma'am, I'm doing, ma'am.
Okay, Tilaga, make Agalya also the
Yeah,
co-host.
sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
Asha?
Actually, ma'am, Asha and Agalya.
Yeah. Hope Jyoti Priya ma'am will join very shortly. The next speaker.
Shri.
Tilaga.
Yeah, what shall we do now, ma? Shall we start? 48 participants as of now.
Okay. So Emmanuel, sir. Emmanuel, sir.
Yes.
Shall we start, sir?
Yeah. Patri sir, welcome. Good morning.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Shall we start now? Shall we start, ma'am?
Yeah. Emmanuel sir, Sridevi ma'am. Shall we?
Yes, you shall.
Okay. Yeah, Asha. Everything is ready, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. A very good morning to one and all present here for the second day of the three-day international conference on redefining theories of communication, 21st century perspectives in language and literature, organized by the Department of English and Other Foreign Languages in collaboration with All India Forum for English Students, Scholars, and Trainers. A warm welcome is the first sign of hospitality. May I request Dr. T. Sridevi, Assistant Professor, Department of EFL, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Ramapuram, Chennai, to welcome the gathering.
Thank you, Asha. Happy morning to one and all present here. Let this day brings happiness, peace, and success to all of us. After enjoying the inaugural session by Dr. Lulia on the emotional communication, we are here to listen the plenary sessions by two eminent speakers. First of all, let me thank my department for giving me this opportunity to welcome this august gathering for the day 2 of this 3-day virtual international conference on redefining theories of communication, 20th century perspectives in language and literature. On behalf of my department, I wholeheartedly welcome Dr. J.A.H. Qatari, Assistant Professor, School of Liberal Studies and Education, Navachana University, who is a renowned academician whose videos lectures are very famous and really supportive for the students community. Your presence makes us really proud, sir. Like your students, we are also waiting to listen you, sir. Next, it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. A. Jyoti Priya, Telangana Assistant Professor, Telangana Social Welfare Degree College, to this august gathering. Apart from an academician, Madam is a great poet and a noble soul who work for the education of underprivileged kids. We feel honored to have you here with us, ma'am. I welcome you, ma'am. It's my immense pleasure to put my hand together to welcome all the professors from various other institutions and from my own department and institution. I feel delighted to welcome all the scholars and students, those who are the real reason behind the success of this international conference. Once again, I welcome wholeheartedly everyone and thanks for the opportunity given. Thank you once again.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to call upon Mrs. K.C. Maithili, Assistant Professor, Department of English and Other Foreign Languages, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Ramapuram, Chennai, to introduce the speaker.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Asha. Well, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce to the gathering the plenary speaker, Dr. J.A.H. Qatari. He is currently an assistant professor at School of Liberal Studies and Education, Navrachna University, Vadodara. He completed his undergraduation at Gujarat University, Ahmedabad, and MS at University of Baroda, Vadodara. He began his teaching career in 2005, and his experience spans over 17 years in teaching. He cleared the national eligibility test in the year 2007. He has a significant number of articles published on different areas of study in both language and literature. A few of his research papers titled Language, Dialect and Tribal Language, Anthropological Study of Manipuri Proverbs, Female Empowerment or Commodification, A Mish Question in Portrayal of Women in Media and Literature, Introduction to Communication Skills, and Culture and Representation, the emerging field of media semiotics displays varied interest and inquisitive mind to explore and exploit the world around him. Apart from publications in English language, he has, to his credit, several other publications in Gujarati as well. He has been the convener, keynote speaker, and moderator of several national and international conferences. Dr. Khatri is a member of the Center for Education, Innovation and Research, member of Reviva 3 for Interwoven, an interdisciplinary journal of Navrachna University, a member of International Cell of the University as well. He has also been a member of Board of Studies for the BA JMC program. His areas of interest include communication theory, semiotics, linguistic anthropology, sociolinguistics, and applied linguistics. We are pretty glad to have you amidst us, sir, and I invite you to deliver the plenary talk, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an elaborate introduction. I would rather prefer to say that I'm a learner of language and communication. So thank you so much for inviting me for this gathering. And before I begin, I must congratulate and appreciate the EFL Department of SRM Institute, Science and Technology, and IFEST India for making this kind of what we call Herculean task possible, and organizing such an international conference, which is basically a need of the day. So without wasting much of our time, let me move on to my presentation. Just give me a minute so that I can upload my PPT. I'm unable to see the sharing option. Yeah, just a moment. Yeah, is my PPT visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
So I'll just minimize my screen so that it doesn't. So my topic is very simple. I'm talking about three very important concepts that have played a very crucial role in the study of language and communication: metaphor, dialogue, and communication. So basically, when we emphasize more and more on interdisciplinary approaches to understand the human sciences, it allows us to look at the issues of social interaction from a newer perspective, which is also supported by cognitive sciences and cultural studies. Here, I'll make an attempt to look at the ideas of idealized or so-called standardized language and the real communication. How are they related? And what will be their impact on the practitioners? I'll be using a special case of non-literal use of language to emphasize the idea that communication brings the language into existence and practice. I also argue that belief in idealized language will adversely affect the variation and multiplicity of practices. So this is the flow of my presentation. So let's move to the first concept, the language. When we look at this code of communication, that is language, we take it as a rule of grammatical rules. It's a set of grammatical rules supported by a certain community and or authority. One's ability to use the grammatical rules appropriately to express oneself is what is known as the capacity to communicate. Thus, linguistic skill is a mastery of abstract rules, something Saussure identified as la langue and Chomsky defined as linguistic competence. You can see the cartoon here from Tarzan and Jane. Rodman Fromkin uses this cartoon to explain the linguistic competence and linguistic performance. So in the first three panels, what Tarzan is thinking while singing, swinging on the way to meet Jane, is basically his linguistic competence, his capability of use the language. But when he actually reaches in front of Jane, and what he actually spoke is his performance. Now, the question is whether it is possible to have knowledge without its actual use. To put it more directly, will there be any linguistic knowledge without employing it in real communication? Here, I argue a lot of meaning emerges from the actual process of communication rather than being fixed in the system of language. To some extent, the process of communication precedes the identified grammatical rules and fixed linguistic meaning. So there's a school of linguistics called integrational linguistics, initiated by British linguist Roy Harris, who comes up with the dictum that language presupposes communication. So the language cannot exist without the need to communicate. Moving forward, this is the speech circuit proposed by Ferdinand de Saussure. Uh, this particular model is also referred to as talking heads model by Roy Harris, and it is also referred to as canonical speech situation by the people working in the field of language and media, such as Dura and Lemrow. Here, Saussure implies that all the participants involved in the communication process possess the same level of linguistic and encyclopedic knowledge. All the participants involved bear the same level of semantic repertoire. In other words, they interpret the utterances identically. This looks fine from the descriptive position because Saussure was basically trying to describe what actually happens in the speech situation. But if we go on the other side of the fence and we take a prescriptive perspective, then this prescriptive view will take the contrary perception. It is not contended with the idea that in a speech situation, the participants involved will interpret the utterances identically. Rather, a prescriptive perspective looks at the situation and prescribes that all the participants must interpret utterances identically. Thus, a hypothetical assumption of speech circuit is taken as a canon, as a dogma, a rule that everyone must follow and master. The model accounts for the linguistic capacity only from one end. It takes the knowledge to be individualistic and monologic. If we go by this hypothesis and hypothetical model from the prescriptive perspective, then every user will have identical linguistic and encyclopedic knowledge. Okay. So we are basically hypothesizing a utopian society where everybody is equal. Linguistic knowledge is an acquired system, and every user acquires it in his or her limited exposure to the world. We have knowledge of language, not to speak, but we have knowledge of language to communicate. The code, that is, the language, is limited, but the users, the communicative situations, and the communicative goals are limitless. Moving to the second concept, communication, it's a process through which we as humans shape ourselves and develop our unique identity as being humans. It distinguishes us from other living beings, as no other living entity has such an advanced communicative system. The tool we have to do such an important task is the language. All of us have this tool, but all of us use it differently. This tool can be used as a tool of compromise, or a tool of cooperation, or even a tool of conflict. All communication is defined and limited by the situation in which they occur, which also define the shape and style of the language to be used. The concerns about appropriateness and not the grammatical correctness are very important in the cases of communication. Bakhtin, Mikhail Bakhtin argues in favor of the idea of dialogue or dialogism, which is again another phase of what we call communication. He adds that we learn or acquire a language because we want to communicate. Through dialogue, language comes from neutral to a socio-political domain. Bakhtin also introduces the concept of heteroglossia, the coexistence of distinct varieties within a single language. This notion goes against the popular notion of the standardized language. The standardized language or the idealized language denies, puts the other non-standardized varieties on hierarchically lower scale. There is a kind of uh, vertical hierarchy created, that the standardized languages are superior languages and non-standardized colloquial languages are inferior languages. So dialogue opposes this very idea of hierarchy. Every variety comes with ideological and social baggage. The denial of a variety is also the denial of a different ideology, a prescriptive or a perspective or a worldview. So if you deny any specific variety as not appropriate variety or not a perfect variety to communicate with, then basically we are trying to deny the worldview that is projected by that ideology, by that variety on the speakers and the users of that variety. Both parties involved in communication act will attempt to represent reality from their respective point of view. So every variety comes with a particular reality. And in this process of representing reality, language becomes a facilitator, directly associated with the user's first-hand experience of the real world. Moving to the third concept, metaphor and figurative language. Metaphor is, in fact, one of the most often utilized techniques for expressing the unknown through analogy with the known. According to Newsell, figurative language is replaced by the term metaphor in the new cognitive domain. As a result, it is no longer merely another figure of speech. On the other hand, Halliday says, I quote, metaphor is an inherent property of higher order semiotic system and a powerful meaning making resource, unquote. We will go ahead with this notion of metaphor as one of the most powerful meaning making resource in day-to-day communication. I'll just cite one example to understand this process, that how we consciously or unconsciously use the non-literal language or metaphoric language in our day-to-day communication. Okay. And it is also embedded in our what we call linguistic system. Let's give me an example. Let me give you an example of, let's say, compound words. When we put two words together to create another word. So if we use a word like black, which is an adjective, and it is a color term, it refers to a specific color hue. But when we combine this word with another word, let's say a noun, money, so the resulting word will be black money. It becomes a noun. And in this noun, black money, there is no sense of color involved in the meaning of this newly formed compound. Here, it refers to income illegally obtained or not declared for tax purposes. So the meaning that we are getting is not only non-compositional, but also non-literal. Here, in this discussion of metaphors, I would specifically like to invoke the examples of proper nouns that are used in non-literal sense. I've got only 3 examples to discuss here. The first one is on Mount Everest. The word Everest, or the name Mount Everest, was named after British surveyor Sir George Everest. Before that, this particular mountain peak was known as Peak 15th. And this particular name was adopted in 1865 by Royal Geographical Society. Now, this new name is now used metaphorically to imply superiority, because Everest is the highest mountain peak, something superior. So in India, we have a brand of spices called Everest Masala. I'm sure all of us are aware about this particular brand. They supply this product all over the world. And the name Everest, which is known to all, creates similar metaphorical extension of meaning. That is not just referring to a brand, but it also refers to the quality of the brand, that they are the best in their domain. Interestingly, there's another brand of spices in the state of Gujarat. Its name is Girnar. And the Girnar also refers to the highest mountain peak in the state of Gujarat. Okay. So Everest is for India and for the world, while Girnar is for Gujarat. Thus, these brand names not only create an identity in terms of the quality of the product, but they also define the market. That Everest is something for India and Girnar is something for Gujarat. Okay. So that proper name gives us metaphorical extension of the meaning. And what is interesting is we don't face any problem in understanding that. The second example I'm taking from the movie called Parched. This movie is basically a Hindi movie, but it sets in the rural background of Rajasthan. And the language used in the film is Hindi, but with a heavy accent and vocabulary from the local variety. That is, there's a lot of words from Rajasthani dialects. There is a question about a women's education, which is Padhi likhi ne Indira Gandhi banna se, which is literally translated as, by educating yourself, do you want to become Indira Gandhi? They're using a proper name, Indira Gandhi, in the statement. Here, the use of proper name, that is proper noun Indira Gandhi, former Prime Minister of India, is used to give the implication of achieving a high position. The name does not refer to the person. Rather, it refers to the position the person had achieved. Similarly, the name of a British-born Pakistani Bollywood actress from the 1980s is used to refer to the beauty. The name of the actress is Salma Aga. The personal reference of the proper noun is minimized to her beauty. So here, what's interesting is we are referring to some human beings, but we are not referring to those human beings in their entirety. We are only taking one characteristic of that human being. So we are taking a metonymy from that noun, and we are assigning that metonymy on somebody else or something else. So we are using proper names, but not referring to the person. We are just referring to the person's position, or we are referring to the person's beauty, and that is assigned to somebody else. Right. Third example, this is from Comfort Fabric Conditioners print media advertisement. This advertisement presents two historical figures in an animated avatar, divided in the middle. We can see there is a border. Above the border, you can see the reddish color. The lower part is blue. That refers to the water. The upper portion is out of water, while the lower half is in the water mixed with the said product. So you can see the bubbles in the water, which implies that the water is mixed with the particular conditioner. Without using any word, the advertisement argues for the softening effect of the product by metaphorically presenting two historical figures, Adolf Hitler and Mohandas Gandhi. The extreme right and liberal political stance are compared with the hard and soft qualities of the fabric, respectively. The simple argumentation visually presented that the hard fabric, like Hitler's hardcore extremism or fascism, will turn into soft, like Gandhi's liberal stance, if it is put into the given product. So they are simply saying that our product has the power to convert the hardcore extremist into the liberal in terms of the what we call fabric. So a very hard fabric can be turned into a soft fabric by using this product. Moving forward, such non-literal use of proper nouns is very normal in our everyday language too. Though I'm just citing the examples from popular culture, but they are very regular in our day-to-day language. Referring to someone as Raja Harishchandra because the person is accustomed to speaking the truth. Or complimenting a lady by calling her Aishwarya Rai or Marilyn Monroe or some other such heroine's name is very normal in our day-to-day communication and dialogues. As a linguist, these practices interest me because they go beyond the so-called linguistic norms. They are unwritten in grammar books and they are unrecognized in dictionary entries. The best part is that the users, either the producers or the consumers, do not have the slightest problem interpreting these extensions of meaning. This poetic aspect of the language takes birth in the actual dialogic event, as it depends primarily on the encyclopedic knowledge of the users. Appropriate interpretation makes the communication successful. So in the end, I would like to say, as Roy Harris has rightly put, that the language presupposes communication. That is, we always require the background of communication to develop a code to communicate. And the research in the Creole languages and like if you go back to, let's say, Derek Bickerton, and they have worked on Creole languages where they have proved that people have actually created a code because they wanted to communicate it. They did not have any common code, and that's why they created Creole language, which was later turned into a pidgin language. But our normal scenario is always in favor of the so-called standardized or idealized language. Now, this bias or precedence of language, a supposed idealized code our communication, and real life practice, they are different. And our normal practice is supporting the idealized language. But this stand implies the favor for idealization rather than practice. And this is also extended to other domains other than language and communication. For example, almost everywhere, the saviors of culture try to save an idealized utopian idea of culture, which is not just hyperreal, but also monocultural. They try to wipe out all the variations of practices and beliefs, and they impose only one so-called correct form of practice. So something that I mentioned with reference to Sassurian model in terms of prescriptivism, that the moment these models are used by prescriptivists, they try to impose it rather than seeing it as something descriptive. So we need to accept the variations in practices and dialogues that allow such practices to flourish and to provide an equal opportunity for every voice in the process of communication. That's all I had to share. These are the references that I've used. Thank you. Any questions? I'll just unshare my PPT so that I can see you people. Yeah, thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Sir, with your permission, let me give a note to the technical team, sir.
Okay.
Tilaga,
Shri?
can you make the chat box enabled for participants?
Yeah, it's enabled, Pa.
Okay.
Yeah. Just one or two comments.
Participants, you shall post your questions in the chat box. Otherwise, you shall unmute yourself and ask the questions to sir.
Dear participants, use the chat box for question and answers.
Okay. More examples from movies or advertisements. Okay. Yeah, there is a direct message to me from Soumita Sarkar. See, advertisements are more or less metaphoric in most of the cases. Right now, I'm concentrating on the proper noun. So I'll give you one example of, let's say, proper noun that's used very eloquently in most of our films, especially in Hindi films. We have a name, Karan. Whenever an actor or the character is show called Najaiz Aulad or discarded child from the family, then his name will be Karan. Because we are our filmmakers and our writers normally take the meaning from the Mahabharata, our mythological traditions. So Karan is basically one of those childs who could not stay with their family members. He was the sixth of the Pandava. So same meaning was associated when the Karan name was used in majority of our films. Okay, even these TV serials like Kyun Ke Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi, where you had that what we call the child of Mihir Virani from his another wife. His name was Karan. On the other hand, we also use something like um, Krishna and Kanaya. So basically, there was a movie also Anil Kapoor starred at Kishan Kanaya. So Kishan Kanaya basically refers to two different what we call avatars of Lord Krishna. So Kishan is a kind of politically conscious person, and who is capable of guiding and what we call leading the what we call his followers, right? And that's why in the movie, the Anil Kapoor, whose name was Kishan, was a kind of macho person. He was fighting all the time. On the other hand, Kanaya is something that refers to the innocence and his what we call his uh, life in Vrindavan, where he was busy with gopis in Ras Leela. So that those characteristics were associated with the character of Anil Kapoor, whose name was Kanaya. So almost everything that we use in visual culture has certain non-literal association. Okay. And like you have this mocha advertisement about this cricket match, especially when there is a match between India and Pakistan. So that advertisement is well accepted in India because we have that unwritten animosity with the Pakistan, and the advertisers are using it to their own what we call benefit. So there are plenty of examples available. Yeah.
So one more question in the chat box.
I doubt. Yeah, honestly, Fair and Lovely has changed into Glow and Lovely. Yeah. Yeah, Sumitra has put a comment on Fair and Lovely. Fair and Lovely has changed name to Glow and Lovely because of the uh, what we call pressure from the feminist and but again, see, when we are changing the names because of the taboo reason, the changed name itself becomes the taboo. Okay. Like almost all the taboo words that we are using, they were once the normal words. Okay. And they are put in to the place of the taboo word, but eventually they also achieve that taboo idea. Okay, very good. Uh, Gender politics in language, or the metaphorical representation of genders in language. There's amazing work done on genders and metaphor. Robin Lakoff is one of the very good sources for that. And Deborah Tannen has also written on the communicative aspects across the gender. So you are primarily concerned probably about the uh, feminine gender, the what we call representation of feminine gender in the language. So I've done one research long back, maybe in 2010, 11, about the representation of gender in Gujarati, because Gujarati has a rich gender system. We have three genders: masculine, feminine, and neutral. But what is interesting is the gender is also assigned to the things which are non-living. Okay, so how do you decide the gender of those non-living things? So in Gujarati, what happens that the things which are smaller will be assigned feminine gender, and the things which are big will be assigned masculine gender. So like we borrowed a word like bottle from English, and then it was nativized into Gujarati, and then it is called bottle or batlo in masculine gender. It's a big bottle, so it's called batlo. And if it's a small bottle, it is called batli, feminine gender. So what's happening is you're not just categorizing masculine versus feminine. You're also categorizing the big versus small, and by extension, you're also categorizing feminine as inferior, superior versus inferior. So then, uh, grammatically, people also use this feminine gender to insult others, even if they are referring to the masculine gender, or they are talking to a male. But in order to insult that person, they use the feminine gender marker. So, right. So that is embedded in the language itself. You cannot remove, like in English, we have chairman. So we want to make it unbiased and we make it chairperson. We use a neutral term. But uh, in Gujarati, it is embedded in the gender system. You cannot change the gender system of the language. So it's very difficult to present things, what we call, in a neutral way. So, so gender and the bias associated with the gender is inbuilt in the language there. And there are many other languages where these kind of issues are there. And John Lakoff's book called Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things also talk about these kind of categories. And it is one of the most important books in the study of metaphors and cognitive domain. Thank you. Okay, very interesting. Yeah, Soumitra is sending messages that comes to me directly. Now, Italian government has passed law to include both father's and mother's surname in child's name towards inclusive society. Okay. Inclusive society on a, like, what we call, from theoretical perspective, it is very good idea, but it is impossible until unless we remove the very idea of patriarchy from our mind. Whether we are using names of parents, both the parents, even in India, we, for our living certificates, for our passports, we include the both the parents' names. Okay. But we are not still becoming inclusive. So the base of patriarchy has to be removed in order to develop that kind of inclusive society. Right. Yes, definitely we have to walk a very, very long way. We have come so far. We have changed a lot, but we still have to do a lot to change the society into a society based on the principles of equality and equity. Yeah. Any other question?
So there is a question from Sagufta.
Okay. Yes, please. Yeah.
I have posted the question.
Even for LGBTQ community, we have a problematic space in linguistics. Yes. Can you please read the question? I'm unable to locate it.
Yeah, after so many years, people do not like to name their children like Kaiki.
Yes.
Is it metaphorical conception of the mythology? What is your point of, what is your point of view about this thought?
Yes, it is. Like, we have certain conceptions about the names that we are using, and those conceptions are coming from our knowledge of the world. So, like, in North, you don't find the name like Ravan or Kansa, because they are directly associated with the negative idea or negative character of Ravan and Kansa. Right. So that's why the people are not keeping these kind of names. So there was this big controversy about Taimur Ali Khan's name in India. Okay. So that was again the idea comes from that very idea of that Temur was once a kind of ruler here, and he has somehow affected the idea of the Indian culture, and that's why people were against this idea of keeping Temur as a name.
Uh, Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, definitely you are right. But as literature and language learners, we are, is it the need to change all these concepts? Because the real meaning, according to language, KK meaning is a good meaning. And if we think about this character KK, she was a good mother who was thinking about Bharata. So why we are not applying such names? Why we have discarded from the society such names?
Yes. See, it's not about who Kaikai was. It's about what is the conception of Kaikai in modern society. So if the conception is negative, people will not accept it and people will try to avoid it. It's basically about the human perception rather than what reality is, because we construct that reality through the language that we are using. So we don't want to impose that reality on our children. And that's why we try to avoid those names. But it is again, you will find a lot of exceptional cases where KKE name will be there. So it completely depends on what kind of society that you are talking about. We have Mahabharata in Gujarat. There is a community called Bhil community who has their own Mahabharata where Arjuna is the villain.
Yeah, the same reason I have asked this, that if we are changing the role of the characters, right? So why we are not accepting all of the things like that, the naming our children and all that? If we can think about Snow White, we can think about the mother, she can be good. So why we can't change? Because language is lively, it's alive, it's changing every day. So is it something that male and female dominating kind of society? We say always no, this is not a good name, always. Yes.
Yes, it see patriarchy is all dominant in India in most of our communities. So Kaikeyi is someone who was taking a stand for her own child, going against her husband's wish. So that is again something going against the idea of patriarchy. Okay. Right.
Okay. Yeah, right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Can I ask one last question?
Yeah, sure. Please.
Sir, when we are going towards into it, sir, the latest thing that is the renaming of the old cities into the new ones, sir.
Yes.
Sir, what is your idea about this? Because I think I shouldn't be politically correct or incorrect, but my personal opinion, we are going far off in changing everything. Don't you think, sir, that renaming entirely changes the cultural, the contextual, the discoursal, every meaning of that particular place or thing as it is, sir? Thank you, sir.
Renaming is directly associated with the idea of memory. By renaming something, you are trying to what we call delete its actual memory, and you are trying to restart a new history of the given place or a person. So basically renaming always comes from certain idea of or certain ideological stand that they want to see the world in only one way. So this is what I said in my conclusion, that when we try to impose certain level of prescriptivism, we basically try to impose monoculturalism. We will try to what we call delete all the reminiscence or all the memories of the what we call varieties that we had. So renaming is part of that process where we try to delete the past memories and we want to create another what we call stand or memory of that. So if you are interested in this particular field, you can check Ganesh Devi's book called After Amnesia. And Ganesh Devi has also published another book in 2022, The Epic and the Nation, where he's because Ganesh Devi's is basically basic ideology, and the core theme of his research is the idea of memory and loss of memory.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving me the correct answer and suggesting some good books also. Sir, I would like to connect with you because I am working in JNV Patan, Gujarat, and
Oh, wonderful.
I am doing my PhD in Gujarat University. So,
Oh,
and it
wonderful.
is in and EFL, that is Applied Linguistics. So, I would like to contact you, sir. I have taken your email ID, sir, and I hope
Wonderful.
that I'll definitely get some good guidance from your side. Thank you, sir.
Who is your guide from Gujarat University?
Sir, my guide is Dr. Bharti Dave, ma'am. She is the principal of Women's College,
Yeah,
Old Ahmedabad, sir.
yeah, I've got the name.
And
All right.
Dushyant sir is very good and very cooperative when it comes to giving information. So
Wonderful.
they are, Darshana ma'am is also known to me, sir. And I'm a part-time PhD student there.
All
Thank you,
right,
sir.
all right. Yeah, sure. All the best. So I hope there are no more questions. I like the audience that don't ask questions actually. Yeah. So
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, Asha ma'am. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for the valuable thoughts and insights on the topic. It's
thank you so
indeed
much.
honey. Yeah, ma'am. Yes, sir. It's indeed honey to our ears. The way you bring in illustrations were mind-boggling, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I thank the audience for such a good audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our pleasure, sir. Now I request Ms. Agalya V.T. Raj, Assistant Professor, Department of English and Other Foreign Languages, to introduce Dr. Ar Jyoti Priya, Assistant Professor, Telangana Social Welfare Degree College, Hyderabad.
The future belongs to the competent. Be willing to go and all out in pursuit of your dream. Ultimately, it will pay off. Here is a person who dreams and makes her dream true by the way of her life. I'm profoundly delighted to take an opportunity to introduce the plenary speaker of the day, Dr. Ar Jyoti. We welcome you, ma'am. On behalf of Department of English and Other Foreign Languages, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, College of Science and Humanities, Ramapuram. I'm elated to share some of her credits with you all. Dr. Ar Jyoti Priya is currently working as an assistant professor in English, Telangana Social Welfare Degree College, Hyderabad. She had her higher education at English and Foreign Languages Universities, Hyderabad. Also, she has her advanced diploma in Spanish. She has participated and won many rewards in poetry competitions like Bingwa National Poetry Contest, IFAS International Poetry Competition, Delhi Slam Poetry Contest. She holds various scholarships and fellowships, also cleared both National Eligibility Tests and Andhra Pradesh State Eligibility Tests. She has written and published many poems. Few notable works of her are Shattered Pieces of Glasses, published in Writers Asylum, Color Chalk, was published in Indus Women's Writing. Flawed was published in Vision Through Words. A Gold Renaissance was published in an anthology of poetry. Also, Dr. Ar Jyoti Priya intended as a spoken English teacher for underprivileged children at Vatsalya Sindhu while volunteering for Youth for Seva, which is an NGO. She has presented in more number of national and international conferences. She has published in more than 5 international journals. She has acquired membership credentials in national level forums and as an editor for Aesthetic Journal for International Literary Enterprises, Agile. She has also delivered many live TV programs on Doordarshan, Yadagiri, and TSAT Media. We are congenial to Dr. Ar Jyoti Priya for accepting our invitation and making her presence today with us. I now invite you, ma'am, to deliver your plenary talk. The forum is yours, ma'am.
Well, thank you for that elongated introduction. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And I'm happy to deliver my talk today on the silent and the articulate perspectives in communication and technology. So what do I mean by the silent and the articulate? And who or what are these silent and articulate elements? And let me ask you, what is something that language cannot do without? What is something that eases your mind when you want it the most, or when you get it, but in the opposite, it frustrates you when somebody doesn't give it back to you, or when you need it, you do not get it at the right point of time? Well, the answer is silence. In 1963, Paul Simon sang The Sounds of Silence, which is a West African proverb, which meant that silence is speech. Now, we can safely say that silence can exist without communication, but communication cannot exist without silence. Because if I were to ask you a question and tell me if you agree with it or not, some of you might say, yes, we agree. But there will be always some people who may not respond at all. So this may be their way of conveying the disagreement with what I said. Therefore, silence silence and articulation are both sides of the same coin of communication theory, which posits that both have constructive as well as destructive connotations depending on the context. And on that note, I would like to divide my session into different segments. The first segment, I would like to see how culture has influenced language, because we know that language is a part of culture as much as it is a part of communication. And then I will be looking at how literature handles the silent and the articulate in terms of the marginalized versus the prosecutor. And then slowly I would try to talk about a little bit about art, how art functions, how art tries to express the voices of so many individuals, so many artists. And finally, I would like to wind up my session with by talking about how communication has transformed technology and vice versa, and the way ahead. So to begin with, when we talk about culture and the culture of silence, there are various interesting things that are happening around us. I would like to introduce you to a concept which many of you might be aware in terms of sociology and political science subjects, to the concept of the spiral of silence theory. I repeat once again, the spiral of silence theory, which was proposed by Elizabeth Noel Neumann, who was a German political scientist. And when she proposed this concept to the global audience, it became a hit. And today it has become such a popular theory that it has been so much widely researched. And especially in communicative psychology, it has changed the mindsets and the intellectual thought processes of various thinkers. So what is this spiral of silence? We often find ourselves involved in this process. So basically what the spiral of silence tries to question is, when we walk back into history, when we take the events that have happened in history, so we try to ask questions like, why did the Germans remain complicit in mass murder? Or why did the US, who were against the US military in Persian Gulf War, change their mindsets? Of course, we are not going into the politics of the matter, but what we are trying to see is, why are generations of people silent? Why do we conform to the cultural milieu of the dominant? Now, the answer lies in the spiral of silence theory. And simply put, the spiral of silence theory states that we are more willing to express our opinions to somebody in a group whom we think hold the same opinion as ours. In other words, if we believe that our thought processes are in alignment with those who think the same, then we are able to express our opinion. But on the other hand, if we believe that our opinions are not in sync with others, then we tend to remain silent or we don't express it outwardly. And this is dangerous not only as a cultural phenomena, but also as a political strategy, because in a way, what happens when divergent views don't come to the fore? What is perceived as the perceived majority opinion may not be the actual majority opinion of the populace. And the divergent opinions are somewhere hidden. They are oppressed because people do not want to express it because that is not the popular opinion. So many a times, the perceived majority opinion becomes the majority opinion. And this majority opinion may not be right always, because there are chances of human errors and human judgments, and human beings we usually we flock in a group where people think alike, and hence the majority perceived opinion gains momentum, giving way to a lot of discourse on various topics, that the divergent people or the divergent opinions are hidden and they are latent and they are not good for the society. And the result of this spiral of silence theory is that the willingness of people to share their opinions or express their views is spiraling down, is continuously in a spiral, and these opinions are oppressed, and they are in fact, the majority opinion is in fact forced upon this unpopularized group of people. And hence the spiral of silence theory says that culture offers a way of influence to the people that that actually changes the opinion of several others. But I observe in today's world that this is slowly changing, because even though we know and understand what the general opinion is, because Newman says that we have a sixth sense. We have a sixth sense, which is called as, which he terms the quasi-statistical organ. The quasi-statistical organ, which makes us aware of what the majority people are thinking. And hence we try to conform to that kind of views. And our views are modified or altered according to the majority views. And this phenomenon seems to be changing in recent times, because due to social media, mass media, people are trying to express their opinions quite openly, even though they are differing from the majority opinion. So social media works as a communication tool for various kinds of or groups of people who may be dissimilar in opinions with the majority of the people, but they want to stand firm in their views. And hence Newman says that the spiral of silence theory can only be broken when people decide to speak. And this has been majorly reflected in various cultures of dominating societies, or Western societies dominating upon the marginalized communities. So the spiral of silence theory can be broken only when people decide to protest. Protest not in silence, not physically, but they start to speak, they start to communicate with the outside world. Now, having said that, there are different ways in which different cultures look at silence, because we notice a lot of differences in behavior when it comes to silence, because silence is a concept in various cultures. Because if you see in Asian as well as American cultures, they react completely differently to silence. In Asian cultures, for example, we take a second or minute or two to say something. When we want to say something, we want to take some pause. But Americans, on the other hand, as a study suggests, that they would not be very comfortable with even a second of silence. And the research has divided various countries into two categories. One is the listening culture countries, and the other is speaking culture countries. Now, who comes under these listening and speaking cultural countries? As a way of an example, Chinese and Canadians were taken as an example in the study, where the Chinese, which is a listening country, and Canadians, which is a speaking country, they are in a process of bidding with each other. So the Chinese, who are very silent, allow the Canadians to start bidding, and Canadians who are not comfortable with the Chinese silence take offense and they lower the bid. And this, in fact, makes the Chinese a much more powerful entity when compared to the Canadians, because their silence is misunderstood. The silence is interpreted as non-participation by the Canadians. And hence here, there is a power play of politics. There's a power play of words. There's a power play of communication. So when there is a meeting of different countries and different cultures, so there are two categories of countries, that is the listening countries and the speaking countries. When they all meet together, the listening countries, where silence is expected, they will understand that the countries who interrupt are not disrespectful of them. And in countries where silence is not to be maintained, they have to understand that the colleagues are just taking time to process what they're saying, and hence the pause is required. So there is a deep cognitive process in understanding the various cultures of different countries in terms of how people react to the silence and what they want to articulate. So this was about the cultural factors and how communication plays a very important role within culture, and how culture influences the common people to dictate what kind of a communication they want to have, or they want to they want to function within that. Coming back to literature. Now, how does literature handle silence? Silence is often a recurring theme in most of the novels, most of the poetry. In fact, as a novel, silence is often referred to as the authorial silence, as in formalist theories. Formalism says that, the text is the superior. The text is the ultimate diktat. That is, it is the ultimate authority, and it is removed from any external influences such as the political or the cultural or the authorial intentions behind the text. And it places supreme authority only on the text. So what is authorial silence? Authorial silence is a way or a tool of removing the intention or the presence of the author's subjective opinion in the text. Now we can see in James Coetzee's 4, for example, or for that matter in Conrad's novels, we see that James Coetzee explains in an epistolatory manner the ways in which meaning is conveyed. Like the characters are speaking in a way that is completely removed from the subjective experience or the subjective opinion of the author. And hence, this subjective opinion is removed and we get the objective reality of the story. According to Booth, he says that there are three functions of silence or authorial silence in a text. The first is clarity of confusion. Second, clarity of thought or clarity of intentions or thoughts or insights. And third, the intention or the secret intention between the reader and the text. There is a different communion when a reader reads a text. There is a different communion between the reader, the text, and the author. And the authors tries their best. The authors do try their best to hide their subjective experiences and present or posit an objective reality to the readers. And hence, this is a very beautifully and a wonderfully portrayed concept by, especially by Ash and Milliman, who said that authorial silence is the most important way in which readers can participate in the reading of a text. So when you read a text, when you read a novel or a story, you want to be involved as a reader. And there was a very famous experiment that was conducted by a very famous scientist as well as a linguist. And what he did was he gave a list of poems to his students, to his group of students, without the names of the authors. There were no titles also. And the group of students were asked to express their opinions just by reading the poem and write a summary of what they have felt by reading those poems. And after the students submitted their assignments, the scientist realized that the author's intention, had he given the authorial background, the context, or the political situation behind those poems, then that would have fixated the meaning in the minds of the students. But it did not happen because the students could think on their own and they could express their own opinions on what the poems felt to them. So poetry is a means of feeling, and it is a way of communicating what one is feeling with regards to the text. So as a case in point, I would like to mention Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things, where Estepin, the character Estepin, is silent for a very long time. In fact, he's the embodiment or the personification of silence because he remains silent for most of the novel. Because he does not want anybody to fall prey to death once again. And the way Arundhati Roy has posited or portrayed the characters and the use of capitalizations, the way the arrangement of words, the phrases in her text show the oral emphasis on words. She is trying to personify the silences that are not seen or that are not heard. Another example would be from poetry which often tries to convey or tries to embody the senses of the humans feels, that it tries to hear or make sounds here, or it tries to personify the physical being as if it was really there. So in poetry has all the elements that that silence and articulation and all the senses can be used to convey in a poem. So for example, in Seamus Heaney's bog poems, as I remember, we see that the bog is a place where bodies of historical or ancient people have been dug up as a result of atrocities committed against certain people. And these individuals have gone through a lot of ritualization as victims of sacrifices to gods in the past. And those bodies are found in current Ireland. And when people suddenly discover a bog which is a mummified version of a human being, they are astounded. And you see that the past is coming back to you. So in a way, we are witness to a collective silence that has happened in the past, and we are quite helpless to it. The same thing happens even in paintings, for that matter. For example, Edward Munch's The Scream. In the painting, there is a figure who is shown to be in a place of natural or scenic beauty, and that person or the figure is trying to yell loudly. And what the viewer is made to feel is that the figure is trying to say something, but we cannot exactly know what it is, because it is a painting. And hence art has a different and a unique way to convey silence. Literature, art in any form can convey the collective consciousness of a large populace within a certain structure. Several novels like The Metamorphosis, where Gregory Samsa is transformed into a small insect. Now, the first thing he feels is that he cannot talk. He cannot identify his voice because his voice has seemed to change, and he is not able to communicate. So this way, literature represents the silence of individuals, and in it lies the deeper meanings of life. After all, our lives are somewhere between the silences and the voices of people around us. And coming back to technology, if we look at technology, there is a story by Hoffman called The Sandman by Hoffman, which is a popular 20th century story, which tells the story of Nathaniel, a boy who comes across a professor, and he visits his home quite often. And there one day he sees a girl, and he falls in love with the girl, and he continues this affair for a long time, but he never speaks or talks to the girl, or he attempts to communicate with her in any sense. But then one day what happens is there is a tussle between the professor and another person, and in the process what happens is the girl, or seemingly the girl, is broken into several pieces. And when Nathaniel realizes this, he discovers that the girl is none other than a robot. So he is definitely crestfallen, and he tries hard to come to terms with its reality. Today, when we think of robots, it is more of a common thing for us today, because we have seen the emergence of computers, technology, artificial intelligences, and how technology has changed our lives. And in critical theory, post-humanism, if I can say so, in post-humanism, or the concept of post-human, is a concept that extends the human capacity in terms of technology. That is, it modifies the human being's capacity or the skills and transforms it into a completely technological human being. So yesterday somebody was asking, what is next after internet? What if internet is not there? Well, I believe that perhaps post-humanism or metaverse would emerge. Post-humanists believe that human technologies have the capacity to alter or modify human bodies. And this in turn can change the way the world functions and how communication functions. And technology paves the way for future development, for scientific development, and the development of the human race. But the fact that we are going to be modified scientifically by these technological elements have discomforted us, because we are not secure being modified. Earlier, say a decade or two ago, we were comfortable being human, because nothing threatened us. But now that technology has arrived and post-humanism is on the way to advancement, and metaverse is just a few decades ahead. So we can expect that human beings are going to undergo a lot of change in terms of the way they are going to communicate. Because in a world of the metaverse, what is going to happen is there's going to be a code. There's a metaverse code where people are going to wear headsets of virtual reality and enter a code and be able to speak to someone on the other side, which has never been happening. So this physical reality or the physical barrier is completely removed in the post-human or the metaphysical or metaverse technology. So here technology becomes the medium of communication, as somebody said, that the medium is the message. So this instrument called the computer or the technology is the way message is communicated. Who knows that tomorrow we would be able to communicate quite easily. Maybe I can be at SRM, or you could physically meet irrespective of what is between. So therefore, we see that there is a constant, the human being is in constant flux. The silence and the articulate are dualities, like they are the binary oppositions, which function in a society which is in constant flux, which is constantly changing. In terms of literature, or in terms of art, or in terms of technology, or for that matter, language, communications offers a way of going forward in terms of being constructive or either destructive. After all, communication is constructive when we take it forward and when we try to understand the other person. But it is destructive when we do not want to say anything, when we are silent. But silence is also a form of communication. But the right balance of silence and articulation is necessary to be able to understand and comprehend the world, especially in human relationships. Silence becomes a barrier oftentimes. The silent treatment that many people give also has a lot of effect on psychological as well as cognitive issues. And isolation, or the fear of being isolated, is also a result of that. So communication can be used or misused in today's generation because technology has changed not just the cognitive process and the communicative process and how individuals interact with one another, but it has also changed the way human beings associate with one another. And this is where we look forward to a future where we should request humanity to be more humane in this context, and try to be more empathetic and not be a machine oriented, or not remain a very cold natured soul like the Frankensteinian being. So with this, I would like to conclude by thanking SRM University and IFEST most of all for all the encouragement and for all the support it has given me. And IFEST is a wonderful platform for all students, teachers, and research scholars who want to participate in teaching learning process. And it offers a lot of services which garner and which help grow the individuals or the student academic merit. So thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your informative speech.
Dear participants, if you have any questions, please post in the chat box. Otherwise, you shall unmute yourself and ask ma'am.
If anybody can unmute and speak, that would be better.
Good morning, ma'am. Can I ask you one question?
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, silence is a huge canopy, and so many things can come under it, into it, outside it. So the way you have explained it, it was brilliant. But what I feel that, don't you think sometimes remaining silent, it can be the first phase of starting any kind of rebellion, or it can also be the opposite. A person who is silent for a longer time can also go towards self-destruction. So how do you access this situation, or what is your opinion on this regard? Thank you, ma'am.
Right. You said that silence precedes communication. No, especially in the form of protest. Silence can often be considered to be non-violent way of communication. But the thing is, to what extent can one be silent? How much silence can be endured? So what is your breaking point? So depending on that, you should try to decide when you want to speak and when you want to rebel, as you use the word. If you want to rebel, then you need to speak up. I think, I don't know under what context you ask me this question. Is it generally, or or you are asking me in a political context?
No, ma'am. It was a very general question, and it can be applied to any kind of situation as such. For example, when we are silent for a longer period, people misunderstand, as you have already rightly mentioned, that it can be misunderstood for either of the purpose. Either I'm accepting it or I'm going against it. For example, some of the mothers, they will say their children, if you do this thing and that thing, I will not talk to you. So as you told that, rightly said, that the fear of being not talked by mother and left all alone, they will obey all the rules. And the opposite also will tell, अच्छा तुम ये नहीं करोगे ना, पापा को आने दो, मैं बता देती हूँ, सब पापा को बता देती हूँ. So both the cases, I think it is a way of giving a treatment to the mischievous children. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, yes. Yeah, actually, our childhood conditioning has a lot of impact on our adult lives or the way we think. So most of it we carry it from our parents or the people whom we have grown up learning from. So these are some small things, but actually they are big things, because giving the silent treatment actually forces the child or the individual to react in a certain way which they may not want to react. So this can have a long-term effect if you look at it in the long run. But when a child grows up and tries to understand itself better, the child understands that it has given wrong meanings to certain situations, in the sense that the child could have reacted a different way if only he or she had thought a certain way. So such modifications in thought happens only in adult life, but the conditioning remains.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dear participants, kindly post your queries in the chat.
Any questions? I don't see any questions.
If you're not having any questions, shall we wind the session, ma'am?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the informative speech. I believe the plenary sessions have enlightened the participants. Rejoice always, give thanks in all the circumstances, for this is the good will. Dear participants, I take delight in welcoming Dr. S. Sangeeta Priya, Assistant Professor, Department of English and Other Foreign Languages, to propose vote of thanks.
Hello. Sangeeta Priya, ma'am.
Sangeeta Priya, ma'am.
Ma'am, am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible, ma'am.
Just a minute, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, ma'am, please position the camera a little bit clear, ma'am.
Gratitude can transform common days into Thanksgiving. With this, let me start my vote of thanks. Yes, gratitude can transform common days into Thanksgivings, turn routine jobs into joy, and change ordinary opportunities into blessings. A thankful heart is not only a greatest virtue, but the parent of all other virtues. It is said, be grateful in your heart. Say thank you. Dear friends, I say thank you because I know how important it is to be thankful. Gratitude is an attitude of heart. True to this, I take immense pleasure in extending my heartfelt gratitude to one and all gathered here. First of all, I would like to convey my sincere gratitude to our resource persons, Dr. J.A.H. Qatari, Assistant Professor, School of Liberal Studies and Education, Naurachana University, Vadodara, for his valuable presence and wonderful rendition. Thank you, sir, for your gracious presence. I thank Dr. A.R. Jyoti Priya, Assistant Professor, Telangana Social Welfare Degree College, Hyderabad, for her valuable presence. Thank you, ma'am, for gracing the occasion. We have learned the art of silence and articulation. I thank you, ma'am. I thank the management, dean, vice principals, admin, and academic for their encouragement and support. I thank the conveners, Dr. Emmanuel, Dr. T. Sridevi, for arranging such a wonderful conference. I thank the technical team for their support. I thank our faculty members for their continuous support. So at last, let me thank you, dear participants. Without you, the program might not have been a successful one. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for making this event a successful one. Once again, let me thank one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sangeeta Priya, ma'am. Dear participants,
Thank you, ma'am.
kindly join the respective panel sessions at the allotted time. The time limit
Asha,
is-
1 minute, Asha.
Yes, ma'am.
Participants, please stay on the line. We will post the links here, links for your paper presentation here itself. Participants are requested to join in the respective panels by 11:30 only.
Hello.
Yeah, Sridevi ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Tilaga.
Yeah, is it over?
No, Tilaga, we need not end the program now.
Yeah, fine.
Ma'am, excuse me, I have a doubt.
Yes,
Yes.
Is it the same thing that you have attached with the Excel sheet?
Yes, ma'am. The same link. It is the same link that we have attached with the Excel, ma'am.
Thank you.
If that hyperlink is working, that's well and good, ma'am.
Fine, thank you.
The previous day you have encountered, the participants have encountered few problems.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, excuse me. Good morning, ma'am. I have a doubt. So by 2 o'clock, the presentation for panel number 10, and I'm supposed to present by 10 o'clock. Sorry, 2 o'clock. So should I actually join the meet by 2 o'clock or 11:30?
Sridevi ma'am.
Sorry.
Yeah, that is that is question for you. It is
Yeah.
participant has asked that whether she has to join by 11 or by 2 o'clock.
So what's the panel number?
12.
10, ma'am.
10 by 11 only, ma'am. 11:45 only.
Okay, ma'am. But the timing mentioned there was 2 to 3:30.
Is it so, ma'am? Wait a minute,
Yeah,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Let me check.
Yeah, please.
So,
Sridevi ma'am.
Tilaga, is Dr. B. Sridevi online?
Okay. Yeah, fine.
Is she online?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, Mrs. Muttamari has a question that do we post the feedback link for this session?
Is she a presenter or participant?
Okay. No. Muttamari ma'am, are you a presenter or participant? Present, Sridevi ma'am.
Okay, then no separate feedback form for her.
Okay.
So her feedback form will be given in the panel itself.
Okay. Yeah, Muttamari ma'am, you got it right, ma'am? If you are a presenter, Your feedback link will be posted in the panel itself.
Ma'am, I'm Pavitra, ma'am, the one I asked question just now.
Yeah, please,
Yeah.
Pavitra, ma'am.
Ma'am, ma'am, my presentation timing is devised as between 2 and
1 minute,
2:30.
ma'am. 1 minute, ma'am. Tilaga, can you please stop streaming?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that.